The world is changing. When Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping met in March of 2023, when Xi Jinping visited Vladimir Putin in Russia, in Moscow, he said on the way to his motorcade that Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping himself were essentially engineering and putting into fruition changes unseen in a century. And one of the changes that is dramatically in our face almost every single day, if you are paying attention, is the fact that the United States' legitimacy as a hegemonic empire, as a global power, is waning. And that nations, rising powers like Russia and China, leading a multipolar world, just do not see it as valuable or worthwhile to pander, to kiss up to, and to even respect the leadership of the so called rules based international order that the United States claims it leads. And why should they? It isn't as if NATO is encircling and moving toward Russia's border, of course, provoking the unthinkable in Ukraine as that proxy war just sees massive losses on the Ukrainian side. And of course, many Russians have died in that conflict, one that Russia has long said is a NATO intervention. China encircled militarily in the Pacific by the United States, also undergoing sanctions. I didn't even mention that with regard to Russia. But both of these countries are leveled with sanctions. They're constantly politically disrespected. The propaganda campaign never ends. So, why should they respect the United States and the collective West? But just a huge example of how this is all transpiring, this massive change in the world, can be seen in the results of diplomatic ventures that are undertaken by China and by Russia. Vladimir Putin is visiting Xi Jinping in Beijing. He landed, I believe it was May 15th, for a state visit. And just the contrast of how Vladimir Putin was treated, his first visit to a foreign country, to another country, since his re-election and since his inauguration. Remember in March of 2023, when Xi Jinping visited Moscow, that was his first state visit to a foreign country after his reinstatement politically as the president of China. These are more than symbolic measures. These are messages to NATO, to the United States, to the unipolar order that time is up. And let me just show you this contrast, because this contrast is just very stark. This is how Vladimir Putin was greeted in Beijing. He was given the full red carpet treatment. Take a look. So, full red carpet treatment, intimacy, a very long and warm welcome for Vladimir Putin in China. And the contrast this with when Antony Blinken, who was recently in China in late April, this is what reception Antony Blinken received when he got off the plane in Shanghai. So notice no red carpet, and he essentially spoke to Ambassador Burns, Ambassador, or no, not Ambassador Burns. That's the CIA director. Um, who is what's his name? Oh, it is Ambassador Burns, Nicholas Burns. I got it right. Anyway, he's a big nothing burger. That's who greeted him essentially. Not a very warm reception. Now, then you can also contrast with Germany's Olaf Scholz. To his credit, did get a red carpet. Here he is in Chongqing. But let's just say, as you can see, it is not as eventful. It is not as warm. There just isn't much excitement around Olaf Scholz's visit either. Okay. It was just get him in, get him out. Let's do business. So that's the difference. Okay. Huge difference. It's a major difference. And that's what shows that the world has changed, because in the past, when Russia was weaker, when China was weaker, when Vladimir Putin was not at the helm of Russia, when Xi Jinping was not at the helm of China, we could even say, just even in the wild 90s, as it's called sometimes in relation to China, there would be much more excitement around state visits, when it came to both countries, because, of course, the Yeltsin years were a very dark period where Russia was essentially a neo-colony of the collective West. And, of course, China really uh, valued its investments that it needed from the United States as part of its opening up and reform. Now, the tables have turned. Russia and China are the ones getting closer, in large part because of US policy and, of course, the collective West's policy of sanctions, of war, of attempting to isolate, contain, weaken, and destroy these countries. But Russia and China are too powerful to destroy, and their increasing unity only means that the US and NATO agenda of containing and weakening Russia and China is going to fail, and already is failing. But it's not just the fact that these two countries share a common foe, they share a common adversary, one that they didn't choose, but one that chose them. It's also that they are very complementary. Dmitry Polanski was on this program, first deputy uh, permanent representative of Russia to the United Nations, saying that China is a great neighbor. It is one that only provides benefits, and that there are no drawbacks. And so it is the positives, it is what both countries get out of this relationship, that moves beyond this idea that NATO and US warmongering somehow is the only thing bringing them together. That's why they call it Putin and Xi Jinping, Russia and China. They call it a no limits partnership. Here is just a little idea of what it means to have a no limits partnership. These are stats derived before Xi Jinping met with Vladimir Putin, and this has only increased this investment, this relationship between Russia and China. It's only gotten bigger in the fact that they've already met their $200 billion trade volume goal that they had for the next year. So here's cooperation with no limits. Okay, here's just some things you should know. Here is the bilateral trade that's booming. 2018, $107.1 billion trade volume. They've surpassed that $200 billion trade volume in just about 4 years now. Robust energy trade. Okay, that's going way up. Russia is trading its crude oil with China and its LNG up massive percentage. Look at the LNG, 43.9% to China, 8.3% crude oil increase to China, and its crude oil supplier, Russia, is the largest to China at 15.68 million tons. That's a 24% increase between 2022 to 2023. All right. So you have surging Russian demand for cars. Look at the market share, 9% to 37% over the last year. And then, of course, you have the agricultural sector. All right. Look at this. Imports in 2022 of Russian agricultural products, 140% year-on-year increase of rapeseed oil, seafood of 500,000 tons, poultry, 139,000 tons. And then investment, Chinese investment in Russia, $10.64 billion. Chinese investment in Russia in 2021 was just 3.3 billion. So it is up 44% in just that 1 year alone. And of course, we're still waiting for updated numbers over the last few years. But nonetheless, this is huge, okay? This is just huge investment. You have, of course, the Chinese yuan overtaking US dollar as the most traded currency in Russia because of the sanctions. You have so many things that are just happening between these two countries, over $165 billion in 75 major intergovernmental investment projects on deck. You have more than 1,000 production enterprises in Russia and 24,000 local workers working inside of Russia. You have developments in progress. You have transport corridors, a China, Mongolia, Russia economic corridor, and just so much happening here. So that's what it means to have no limits cooperation. That's just economics, right? Because that's what China likes to focus on. It doesn't try to provoke or talk about how Russia and China are coordinating, but they're coordinating at all levels. They're coordinating also at the diplomatic level. That's why you have immediately as this meeting was coming into fruition in Beijing, here is what Vladimir Putin had to say. China clearly understands roots of Ukraine crisis. The two countries' coordination is propelling the establishment of a fair, multipolar world order. So this is how they're cooperating. They're cooperating on every single matter, okay, especially politically and even militarily. This is what Putin has said before his trip to China. Russia is open to dialogue in Ukraine, but negotiations must take into account interests of all countries, including Russia's, and he expressed positive views of China's position. So China will maintain communication with and mediation among all parties involved, and the key problem is that other parties have shut down the door for negotiations and insist on a military solution, wink, wink, the US and NATO. So, as Putin was about to go to his 2-day visit to China, Putin stated in a written interview with Xinhua News Agency that Russia and China are promoting prosperity of both nations through expanded and mutually beneficial cooperation in economic and cultural fields. He said that the coordination of foreign policies between the two countries is propelling the establishment of a fair multipolar world order, which underpins future success of Russia and China's comprehensive strategic partnership for the coordination in the new era. And on the Ukraine crisis, Putin said clearly China understands the roots of the Ukraine crisis and its global geopolitical impact, as reflected on China's position of the political settlement of the Ukraine crisis, a 12-point proposition issued by China in February 2023. The concepts and suggestions indicated in the document demonstrate a sincere desire of China to stabilize the situation. Putin emphasized 4 principles for the peaceful resolution of the Ukraine crisis, recently proposed by President Xi Jinping of China, seamlessly fitting in the above-mentioned document. So that's what it is. They have a mutual understanding and mutual respect. China is the only major country right now to acknowledge the fact that Russia not only has legitimate security interests, that if peace is ever to reign in that conflict, that Russia's needs and interests will not only have to be taken into consideration, but likely will have to be a primary part in peace of any kind of settlement. That is the reality. That is the reality that reigns right now. So we have the situation, okay, where Vladimir Putin is meeting in China right now. There is going to be a lot of deals inked. The bilateral partnership will only get stronger. I can pull up the agenda, but honestly, when it comes to meetings like this, we do know what's going to happen. We know that business is going to be done. We know that projects are going to be signed. We also know that Vladimir Putin is likely going to invite China formally to the BRICS summit happening in Kazan this October in Russia. But we can just go through some of what will happen. Okay, this is what Russia said. They said there'll be an in-depth exchange of views on issues of interaction of various international solidarity organizations and structures, including the UN, where Russia and China speak in solidarity on almost all topics on the UN agenda. It is very important under the current circumstances that our partnership demonstrates it is resistant to any outside meddling. The Russian leader arrives in Beijing just 10 days after his inauguration, the same amount of time that Xi Jinping waited to visit Russia. So basically, they're coordinating even the amount of time they're waiting to make their first visit. I mean, if this isn't just politics 101, if this isn't geopolitics 101, from a completely different perspective, a new kind of geopolitical dynamic, if you don't understand that the reason why they're doing this goes beyond just unsubstantive, shallow symbolism, then you don't understand politics. Because the truth of the matter here is that Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping are sending a very strong message to the collective West. And the strong message is that they are strong and that they are together and united. And not only are they united, but they are so strong and united that they are resistant to outside meddling. And that is really the key point here, okay? Because, we can talk about the items on the agenda, right? The Ukraine crisis will be on the agenda. There's going to be Eurasian Union integration with China's Belt and Road Initiative, a huge deal, mind you. It is a huge deal that every single time Putin and Xi Jinping meet now, that they're always talking about integrating and synergizing the Eurasian Economic Union, led by Russia, and the Belt and Road Initiative, which is much larger, led by China. And why is that such a huge deal? Well, because the collective West has said for years that these two projects are not complementary, that they are actually at odds with each other. Nothing could be further from the truth. They're going to talk about Ukraine, the Middle East, Gaza, and other matters in the region. So there's going to be a dozen bilateral documents signed during the visit, many commercial deals and agreements. There's going to be a formal invite, as I said, to BRICS from Vladimir Putin to Xi Jinping. So that's what's going to happen. That's what's going to happen. So even if this isn't covered until later afterward, you can believe that the words that they say, all these meetings, right? There's nothing that's decided at these meetings that, it's already been decided. Anything about how a state visit like this will work, especially with how a government like China and like Russia's works. They don't go in this. It would not make any sense to go into a meeting like this with such a little amount of time to deliberate, to come in without really already an agenda agreed upon by both sides. So you're going to see the deals come out. You're going to see the invitations. But really, here, the big point is that politically, there is a huge message being sent by both Russia and China. They are resistant to outside meddling, meaning the United States, NATO, you're done, you're finished. You cannot assert your influence, your agenda. You cannot impose anything on us that will change the dynamic of our relationship and the overall trajectory of both of our societies and countries, which is up. That trajectory is up. These two countries are on the rise. Both of these economies are growing despite major challenges, and acts of war against them by the United States and NATO. And that these two countries are not only doing well for themselves, but they are setting themselves up to be not just dutiful partners and comrades in solidarity with each other on a bilateral level, but they are being the stewards. They are developing themselves as the stewards of a multipolar world order, one that is far more democratic, that is far more peaceful, and that has far more benefits economically, politically, and the rest for the global majority. Essentially, what Russia and China are saying, what Putin and Xi Jinping are saying, is that they are the future, and those who are trying to meddle, NATO, the United States, they're really history. They are putting themselves in the history books as an era that is quickly and rapidly going into the past. So this is a huge deal. This is a huge deal because every single time these two leaders meet, and they're going to meet more, there's going to be more meetings. This isn't just it. There will be meetings this year, next year, and for as long as they are at the helm of their respective countries. But every time they meet, there are massive gestures, from the huge contrasts with Antony Blinken and the heads of state, even Joe Biden. We didn't even there weren't huge highlights coming out of there either. There wasn't a red carpet there wasn't a huge deal made about Joe Biden's um, not Joe Biden's visit to China, but even the San Francisco situation, right? Xi Jinping, the United States tried to do what it always does with China, insult it. But Xi Jinping didn't make a big deal about going to the United States. It wasn't really a huge hallmark. All they wanted was to get something from the United States, assuring that at the very least, some level of the status quo can continue. Of course, they got words and promises, but it didn't amount to anything. And so, Russia, forget about it. They're at war right now with NATO and the United States. There is no diplomacy. There is no goodwill. There's no state visits happening anytime soon between Putin and whoever happens to be at the helm in the United States, whether it's Joe Biden or the next president. If it's Trump, there's claims that Trump will end the war, but we have to be honest. It might likely will not be up to him, but we shall see. Point here is that Putin, Xi Jinping, Russia, and China, they just sent a massive message to NATO, to the United States, to the collective West, that the era where they call the shots, the era where they dominate for the sake of their own interests, the era where Russia and China are subject to that domination, that era is over. And that is something truly to celebrate in a time where we are facing just massive calamity, massive destruction in places like Palestine and Gaza, where we're seeing Ukraine, when we are seeing the hegemon flailing like a dying fish out of water and spreading its poison everywhere, just increasing the levels of destruction and murder and just crimes against humanity like we see in Gaza. It should give us all hope that we have Russia, that we have China developing in this way, so that not only is the world order more balanced, but it's more just. Because the stronger these countries become, the stronger the global majority becomes, the more favorable the world situation becomes for nations like Palestine, for those who happen to be at the most unfavorable position in this global geopolitical class structure. That should be what is also on our minds, because oftentimes when we talk about Vladimir Putin or Xi Jinping or Russia and China and the collective West, even among our friends in the peace movement, there's a lot of suspicion, there's a lot of denigration, there's a lot of ill feelings, there's a lot of doubt cast because of how effective the propaganda war has been. Well, let me just be very affirmative and firm in saying that no amount of doubt, no amount of prejudice, no amount of xenophobia, Russophobia, anti-Putin ideology, anti-Russian ideology, anti-China, hawkish ideology, no amount of yellow peril or anything of that sort, Cold War 2.0 brain fog, can change the reality on the ground. Similar to the Ukraine conflict, similar to what's happening all around the world, the reality is that Russia and China are making themselves resistant to foreign and outside meddling, namely by the United States and its collective West vassals. And that means that we have to pay attention to what they're doing. We have to pay attention and understand exactly what it looks like and what it means. And from all the facts that we have, the situation is far brighter with their leadership, with their um, increasing influence in the overall world order. And so, for that, there is some hope that this new world order, often people get scared of that, but this new world order that's emerging is one that will be more beneficial to humanity than the one, certainly, that we have now.
Thank you for tuning in to my latest video. I appreciate all of your support. This channel, however, needs your help. I am seeking to make this channel more sustainable in the long term and upgrade necessary equipment to ensure that this work continues onward and makes progress to give you all of the geopolitical analysis that you all deserve. For that reason, I'm asking you to become a member of my Patreon community at patreon.com/DannyDhaiphong. You can find that link in the video description or in the pinned comment below. For whatever amount you choose to give, just know you are supporting independent media that you can't find anywhere else. Thank you so much, and I look forward to the next video.